When thinking about idolization, or idolatry, one tends to think either in a religious context, like ancient idol worship, or in a modern context, like a passionate sports fan following their team throughout the season. Regardless of how you perceive idolization, and whether you're spiritually minded or not, everyone idolizes something. A synonym for idolatry is worship. In other words, everyone worships something, whether they realize it or not. For some it's fame, whereas others are seduced by money, power, sex, etc. It's easy to forget this fact when you're stuck in a one-track mindset, a tunnel vision where what you're idolizing is all that matters. With that said, what do you idolize? What are the implications? And why does this matter? To begin, whether you believe in God or not, it's foolishness to dismiss every insight from this line of thought and sweep it into the modern world's trash bin of irrelevancy. The truth is that idolatry is still relevant, and it'll never go away. Idolatry doesn't appear to be as obvious anymore, like the ancient Israelites worshipping a golden calf at the foot of Mount Sinai, but it still very much exists. Everyone worships something, and it's expressed through prioritization. Where do you spend most of your money that's not for rent or other living essentials? Where do you spend most of your leisure time, and what activities do you engage in? The answers to these questions will reveal what you idolize/worship. As an important note, prioritizing certain endeavors above others isn't necessarily a negative phenomenon. There are certainly more positive life elements that one could idolize versus others, like prioritizing self-improvement over getting wasted every weekend. As with anything, when determining if something is negative, one must provide context. Too much of an ostensibly good endeavor can become detrimental. Here's an example I can specifically relate to. Hitting the gym to become stronger is certainly a productive venture. Not only will you become stronger, but you'll also gain increased confidence and a more positive view of yourself. Other benefits could be listed, but I don't need to go on about them. Where this becomes a problem is if pursuing the perfect gym body becomes the absolute most important endeavor, to the detriment of everything else. Put differently, gym becomes life in a manifestly literal sense. I realize that I value/idolize the gym, and I seek to become stronger, but I'm also aware that the gym doesn't encompass every waking moment of life, nor should it. The threshold of when a positive pursuit becomes negative is when other dimensions of life begin to suffer, like relations with family and friends, or external responsibilities. One doesn't need to be addicted to drugs in order to get off track with responsibilities. How adamantly you pursue what you idolize is just as important as the actual idol itself. Is it reasonable, or has it become fanatical? So, what's the point in acknowledging that everyone idolizes/worships something? The point rests within the acknowledgement of how it can affect you. In other words, the implications are what makes this truth matter. If you aren't aware of something's implications, then you won't comprehend how it affects you until it's too late. For example, some people aren't aware that they spend too much money on specific items until they check their bank statements. Additionally, the consequences are far worse when it hits them elsewhere. Now they can't afford their rent or mortgage and other vital payments because they were ignorant of how much they spent on leisure. Phrased differently, their idolization leads them astray and they're paying the price for it. For myself, I attempt to be aware of how much I prioritize the gym, among other priorities. The implications are the amount of time and money I spend to feed this priority. Because I'm more or less conscious of how pursuing this idol affects me, I'm able to curtail this pursuit if it becomes too much of a detriment. When it affects performance at work or school, then I have to scale it back, and vice versa. Understanding the consequences of what you pursue cannot be accomplished without awareness or insight. For yourself, you should aspire to possess a comparable awareness level regarding what you idolize. It's easy to operate on autopilot and ignore circumstances until they become disastrous. In order to avoid unfortunate outcomes and spare yourself unnecessary hardship, you must become aware of what you prioritize and how it affects you. Avoid pursuing one specific idol or priority into oblivion, otherwise you'll find that other life dimensions will begin to fall apart. At the end of the day, one must ask themselves, am I aware of what I'm pursuing, and am I aware of its effects? If you're able to answer these questions, good, because you can envision the potentialities. You understand that negative consequences can arise from a lack of attention and awareness. For those who are less aware, or may not be able to identify what they idolize, begin with where you spend your time. Figure out where you spend the majority of your leisure time, and where you spend the majority of your money. Perhaps it's not just one dimension, but multiple areas. Once you've figured that out, ask yourself whether these are activities in which you truly want to engage in. Furthermore, if they're beneficial or detrimental. Getting to the bottom of these questions will not only increase your comprehension, but it'll also determine if you're making the most of your time. We only have so much time before we expire, and therefore, we cannot afford to waste it. How you pursue something, the means, is just as important as what you pursue, the ends.